The rain hammered Portland's Multnomah County Courthouse like 1,000 angry fists, each drop exploding against the Gothic Revival windows that had watched over the city's justice system since 1914. Judge Marcus Hale sat behind his elevated bench, the American and Oregon flags flanking him like silent sentries, his black robe crisp and immaculate despite the humid November morning that had everyone else wilting in their seats. The courtroom smelled of old wood polish, nervous sweat, and the peculiar mustiness that seemed to infest every government building in the Pacific Northwest. Outside, the city was a watercolor of gray, the Willamette River swollen with autumn runoff, the West Hills shrouded in mist, downtown's towers barely visible through the deluge. But inside Courtroom 4C, Marcus Hale's domain, everything was precise, ordered, and unambiguous. He adjusted his reading glasses and reviewed the docket with the same meticulous attention he'd brought to the bench for 23 years. Petty theft, drug possession, domestic disturbance, the usual parade of human weakness and poor decisions that flowed through Portland's legal system like the rain through the gutters outside. Then his eyes landed on the next case, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Case number 47B, the bailiff announced, his voice echoing off the mahogany paneling. State of Oregon versus Cole Riker. Assault in the second degree. Disturbing the peace. Resisting arrest." The courtroom doors opened, and Marcus felt his distaste curdle into something colder as Cole Riker was led in by two deputies. The man was exactly what Marcus expected. Late 30s, built like someone who'd spent significant time either in a gym or in prison, likely both. His left eye was swollen nearly shut, an angry purple-black that spread across his cheekbone like spilled ink. His knuckles were wrapped in gauze-stained rust brown with dried blood. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt that had seen better days, and despite the deputies flanking him, he moved with an unsettling calm, like a predator confident in its territory. But it was the jacket draped over his shoulders that made Marcus's expression harden into granite. Leather, black, and on the back, worn with defiant pride, the Death's Head insignia and rocker patches that proclaimed Hell's Angels, Motorcycle Club, Portland. Marcus had seen enough of these cases. Enough broken noses and shattered bar mirrors, enough tearful victims and smirking defendants who treated the courtroom like an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. The motorcycle clubs, particularly the Hells Angels, had been a thorn in Portland's side for decades, their clubhouse in northeast Portland a constant source of complaints, investigations, and exactly this kind of violence. Cole stood before the bench, his good eye meeting Marcus's gaze without flinching. There was no contrition there, no fear, just a kind of weary patience, as if he'd been through this dance before and knew all the steps. "Mr. Riker," Marcus began, his voice carrying that particular timbre he'd perfected over 2 decades, the one that could make grown men feel like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. "According to the police report, you were involved in an altercation outside the Barrel Room on Southeast Stark Street last Friday evening. The report states you assaulted 2 men, sending one to the hospital with a broken jaw and 3 fractured ribs. Your Honor, if I may, Cole's public defender, a young woman named Sarah Chen, who looked fresh out of Lewis and Clark Law School, rose quickly. She was overworked and underpaid, carrying a briefcase stuffed with too many files, her expression already resigned to defeat. Marcus held up one hand. "You'll have your opportunity, counselor. I'm not finished." He returned his attention to Cole, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "The report also indicates that you damaged property, caused significant public disturbance, and resisted arrest, requiring 3 officers to subdue you." Cole said nothing. His expression remained neutral, though something flickered in that one good eye. Not defiance exactly, but not submission either. "I've been on this bench for 23 years, Mr. Riker," Marcus continued, his voice taking on an edge that could cut glass. In that time, I've seen every variation of humanity that walks through these doors. The desperate, the broken, the genuinely remorseful. And then there are people like you." Sarah Chen shifted uncomfortably. The court reporter's fingers paused momentarily over her stenotype machine. Even the deputies exchanged glances. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped on the bench before him. People who choose to affiliate with criminal organizations, who glorify violence and lawlessness, who wear their contempt for civilized society like a badge of honor. His eyes dropped to the Hells Angels insignia, then rose back to Cole's face with undisguised contempt. "You're not a rebel, Mr. Riker. You're not a free spirit or a misunderstood soul. You're simply trash. Human refuse that decent people have to step around on their way to building something meaningful with their lives." The courtroom went utterly still. Even the rain seemed to quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Cole's jaw tightened, the muscles flexing beneath the bruising. For just a moment, something dangerous flashed across his features, a glimpse of the violence that had put him in this courtroom in the first place. But then it was gone, replaced by that same unnerving calm. "Your Honor," Sarah Chen tried again, her voice cracking slightly. Mr. Riker was defending himself. "The police report shows that he was attacked first by—" "Counselor Chen," Marcus interrupted, his tone glacier cold. "I don't care if he was defending the Pope himself. Your client is a member of a criminal motorcycle gang with a documented history of violence, drug trafficking, and organized crime. The circumstances of this particular fight are irrelevant when weighed against the larger pattern of behavior he represents." He turned back to Cole, and now his voice carried not just authority but genuine revulsion. "You contribute nothing to this community, Mr. Riker. You take up resources, police time, court time, hospital beds that could go to people who actually deserve them. You're a cancer on Portland's social fabric, and I will not show mercy to cancer." Marcus paused, letting his words sink in like acid. Around the courtroom, a few people shifted in their seats. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man named Davidson, who'd seen this kind of judicial grandstanding before, kept his expression carefully neutral. Sarah Chen looked like she wanted to object, but didn't dare. 6 months in Multnomah County Detention Center, Marcus declared, his gavel hand already rising. "Maybe that will give you time to reflect on whether the lifestyle you've chosen is worth the cost. And when you get out, I suggest you find a different city to call home. Portland has enough problems without adding more trash to its streets." The gavel fell with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. Cole Riker didn't flinch. He stood there, his battered face impassive, as the deputies moved to escort him out. But just before they turned him toward the door, he spoke for the first time, his voice low and rough, like gravel rolling in a metal drum. "You don't know anything about me." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even particularly hostile. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the same calm certainty that he'd maintained throughout the entire proceeding. Marcus felt a flash of anger. How dare this criminal speak to him without permission, without being addressed? But before he could respond, the deputies were already moving Cole toward the exit. The moment passed, and then Cole Riker was gone, the courtroom doors swinging shut behind him with a heavy thud that somehow felt more final than the gavel strike. Marcus took a breath, composing himself. Around him, the machinery of justice continued its relentless grind. The clerk called the next case. People shuffled papers. Life moved on, indifferent to the small drama that had just unfolded. But for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, Marcus felt unsettled. There had been something in Cole's voice, not anger or even resentment, but something else, something that felt uncomfortably like pity. He shook off the feeling. Ridiculous. What could a thug possibly pity about a respected judge? Marcus had dedicated his life to the law, to order, to making Portland a safer place. He had nothing to be ashamed of. The rain picked up again outside, drumming harder against the windows. Marcus returned his attention to his docket, already pushing Cole Riker from his mind. The man was trash, as he'd said, unworthy of another moment's thought. He had no way of knowing that in less than 6 hours his entire understanding of the world would shatter like glass. By 3:30 that afternoon, the rain had evolved from a downpour into something biblical. The Willamette had risen another 2 inches, and Portland's streets were rivers of churning brown water that overwhelmed storm drains and turned intersections into impromptu lakes. Marcus sat in his chambers, reviewing case files with the same methodical precision he brought to everything, when the first wave of dizziness hit him. He gripped the edge of his desk, waiting for it to pass. Probably just low blood sugar. He'd skipped lunch again, too absorbed in his work to bother with something as mundane as food. Clara was always on him about that, always reminding him that he couldn't sustain himself on coffee and righteousness alone. Clara. The thought of his wife sent a familiar ache through his chest, one that had nothing to do with whatever was currently making his vision swim. She was at Providence Portland Medical Center right now, in the oncology wing, probably dozing in her chair while the chemotherapy dripped slowly into her veins. Stage 3 ovarian cancer, diagnosed 14 months ago. They'd caught it late. Clara had ignored the symptoms for too long, too stubborn to slow down, too convinced she was invincible. She was on her 3rd round of treatment. The first 2 hadn't taken. The tumors had shrunk but never disappeared, always coming back with renewed vengeance. This 3rd protocol was experimental, aggressive, and their last real hope. The medical bills were staggering, even with his insurance. Marcus had taken out a second mortgage on their Laurelhurst home, cashed in his retirement accounts, and still found himself staring at statements that made his chest tight with panic. But he never let Clara see that panic, never let her know that he lay awake at night, calculating and recalculating, trying to figure out how to afford another round of treatment if this one failed. She needed him to be strong, unwavering, certain. So that's what he gave her, even when the ground felt like it was crumbling beneath his feet. The dizziness came again, stronger this time. Marcus stood, thinking fresh air might help, and made it 3 steps before the world tilted violently sideways. His vision tunneled, darkness creeping in from the edges, and he heard himself make a sound, not quite a gasp, more like a surprised exhalation before his legs simply stopped working. He had a brief, absurd memory of his father's heart attack 30 years ago, the way the old man had described it, like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. This wasn't quite that. This was more like someone had simply flipped his off switch, his body suddenly and completely refusing to cooperate. Marcus hit the floor hard, his shoulder striking first, then his head. Pain bloomed bright and sharp, and then everything went fuzzy and distant, like he was watching himself from somewhere far away. He heard shouting, felt hands on him, heard his secretary, Margaret, her voice high and panicked, calling 911. The world became fragments. The textured pattern of the office carpet pressed against his cheek, the antiseptic smell of the cleaning products the janitorial staff used, the taste of copper in his mouth where he'd bitten his tongue. Then movement. More hands. Professional voices cutting through the chaos with practiced efficiency. EMTs, Marcus realized dimly. They were asking him questions. Could he hear them? Did he know his name? What year was it? But his mouth wouldn't form the words. His brain knew the answers, but the connection between thought and speech had been severed. They loaded him onto a gurney. The ceiling of the courthouse passed overhead in a blur of fluorescent lights and aged plaster. Then the loading bay, the rain pelting his face for just a moment before they got him into the ambulance, and the wail of sirens cutting through the afternoon's grey monotony. Marcus tried to focus, tried to make sense of what was happening, but his thoughts kept sliding away like water through his fingers. Stroke, some distant part of his brain supplied. This is probably a stroke. Clara would be so angry. He'd promised her he'd get his blood pressure checked, promised he'd slow down, and he'd done neither because there was always too much work, always another case, always someone who needed justice delivered. The ambulance swayed and jolted through Portland's flooded streets. Through the small window, Marcus caught glimpses of the city, the iconic white arches of the convention center, the industrial sprawl of the Lloyd District, the towering glass presence of the hospital complex growing larger as they approached. Providence Portland Medical Center, where Clara was, right now, in the oncology wing. The irony wasn't lost on him, even in his compromised state. They'd be together after all, just not the way either of them had planned. The ambulance doors flew open. More movement, more professional voices. The rain had followed them into the loading bay, or maybe it was everywhere now. Inescapable. They wheeled him through automatic doors into a blast of warm air that smelled like disinfectant and sickness, and that peculiar hospital smell that defied description, but was instantly recognizable. 57-year-old male, syncope followed by altered mental status, BP 190/110, heart rate elevated. The EMT's voice faded in and out like a radio with poor reception. More hallways. The ceiling tiles passed overhead in a hypnotic rhythm. Then they were in the emergency department, and suddenly there were more people, more voices, and someone was shining a light in his eyes that felt like an ice pick through his skull. "Judge Hale?" A woman's voice, close to his ear. "Judge Hale, can you hear me? I'm Dr. Ramirez. You're at Providence, Portland. You've had what looks like a cerebrovascular event. We're going to take care of you, okay?" Marcus tried to nod, tried to speak, tried to ask about Clara, but his body still wasn't cooperating. Fear joined the confusion, real and primal. He was a man who'd spent his entire career in control of his courtroom, his cases, his emotions, and now he couldn't even control his own limbs. They ran tests. CT scan, the massive machine whirring and clicking around his head while he lay perfectly still because moving was no longer an option anyway. Blood draws, the sharp sting barely registering. An EKG, the sticky pads cold against his chest. Through it all, fragments of conversation drifted to him. Definitely ischemic. Get him upstairs to neuro. His wife is in oncology. Someone should notify. Time became meaningless. Could have been minutes or hours. Eventually, the emergency room's harsh fluorescence gave way to softer lighting as they wheeled him onto an elevator and then into a different part of the hospital entirely. The walls here were painted in warm, soothing colors, sage green and warm taupe, and there were actual artworks hanging in frames instead of just anatomical posters and safety reminders. "Welcome to the neurology wing," someone said cheerfully, as if he were checking into a hotel rather than fighting off a stroke. "We're going to get you settled." They moved him into a private room, the kind with actual windows that looked out over the city. Through the rain-streaked glass, Marcus could see downtown Portland stretching toward the river, the bridges spanning the grey water like elegant stitches holding the city together. The West Hills rose beyond, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. His room was surprisingly nice, not just functional medical space, but designed with some thought toward comfort. The walls were that same sage green, and there was real art, a photograph of Multnomah Falls, the water frozen mid-cascade, surrounded by the deep green of the Columbia Gorge forest. The furniture was wood, not cheap laminate. Even the chair where Clara would undoubtedly spend hours sitting looked more comfortable than the usual hospital offerings. Clara. They'd told her by now, surely. Would they let her come up, or was she still hooked to her own IV, poison dripping in to kill the poison already inside her? A nurse appeared, older woman with kind eyes and efficient hands. Her name tag read Janet. She checked his vitals, adjusted his IV, and spoke to him in that particular tone medical professionals used with patients who might or might not be able to understand. Clear, slow, but not quite condescending. "Judge Hale, you're stable now. The imaging shows a minor ischemic stroke, probably caused by that blood pressure of yours. Dr. Ramirez will be up to talk to you once the swelling goes down a bit more." Your wife has been notified, and she'll be up as soon as they can disconnect her from her treatment. You're in good hands here. This wing—" She paused, something shifting in her expression. "This wing is the best in the state for neurological care. You're very lucky." Lucky. Marcus wanted to laugh, but still couldn't quite manage it. Lucky would have been not having a stroke. Lucky would have been Clara not having cancer. Lucky would have been a different life entirely. Janet left, and Marcus was alone with the sound of rain against the window and the steady beep of the monitor tracking his heartbeat. The medication they'd given him was pulling him under, making his thoughts fuzzy and warm at the edges. He let himself drift, too exhausted to fight it. He was almost asleep when he heard voices in the hallway outside his room. Two nurses talking in those loud whispers that people use when they think they're being quiet, but aren't. "Still can't believe they almost shut this wing down. Would have been a disaster. How many people depend on these beds? Thank God for that anonymous donor. Saved the whole program." The words floated past, not quite registering. Marcus's eyes were already closing, darkness pulling him down into its embrace. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was the rain still falling outside, the city grey and smudged beyond the glass, and the photograph of Multnomah Falls frozen in eternal cascade on the wall across from his bed. He didn't know yet, didn't understand the significance of his room's comfortable chair or its careful artwork. Didn't realize that the wing saving his life right now only existed because of money that had flowed in anonymously 8 months ago, right when state budget cuts had threatened to close it permanently. Didn't know that the signature on those checks, written in careful, neat handwriting, belonged to the same man he'd called trash just 6 hours earlier. But he was about to find out. Marcus woke to the sound of voices and the grey light of evening filtering through his hospital room window. For a confused moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why everything hurt, and then it all came rushing back. The courtroom, the dizziness, the fall, the stroke. He tried to sit up and managed it this time, his body responding again, even if it felt sluggish and strange, like he was operating machinery he didn't quite know how to control. The fog in his head had cleared somewhat, though his thoughts still felt like they were moving through honey. "Marcus." He turned his head, slowly, carefully, and there she was. Clara sat in the chair beside his bed, and even after 29 years of marriage, even with the cancer ravaging her body, even with her hair gone, and her frame gaunt beneath the oversized cardigan she wore, she was still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Hey," he managed, his voice rough and cracked. Even that single word took more effort than it should have. "Hey, yourself!" Her smile was tired but genuine, and she reached out to take his hand. Her fingers were cold, the skin thin and delicate like paper. "You scared the hell out of me, Marcus. I'm supposed to be the one in the hospital bed, remember? That's my job. You can't just steal my role like that." He tried to smile back, but his face didn't quite cooperate. Half of it felt numb, disconnected. "How long?" 3 hours since they brought you up. They kept me updated while I finished my treatment. Then I came straight here." She squeezed his hand gently. "Dr. Ramirez says you're going to be fine. Minor stroke, no major damage. You'll need physical therapy, probably some speech therapy for a few weeks, but you should make a full recovery." "The courtroom is not your concern right now," Clara said firmly. "Margaret already called your clerk. They're rescheduling everything. The world doesn't end just because Marcus Hale takes a few days off." Despite everything, Marcus felt a surge of frustration. He had cases pending, decisions to write, a docket that stretched for months. Portland's legal system didn't pause for anyone's convenience, not even a stroke victim's. "What you need to do," Clara interrupted, her voice taking on that particular tone that had kept him in line for 3 decades, "is rest. Let your brain heal. Stop being so damn stubborn for 5 minutes and accept that you're human." She was right, of course. She was always right, which was one of the many reasons he'd married her. Clara had been a public defender when they met. Brilliant, fierce and utterly unwilling to tolerate his bullshit. She'd left that career when her father got sick, taking over the family's bookstore in Hawthorne while caring for him through his final years. By the time Marcus had built his judicial career, she'd built something quieter but no less meaningful, a community institution where people gathered not just for books, but for connection, for conversation, for the kind of human warmth that seemed increasingly rare in the digital age. And then the cancer came, and both their lives had narrowed to this: hospitals and treatments, and trying to steal whatever moments of normalcy they could between the medical procedures that marked their days. "How was your treatment?" Marcus asked, changing the subject. Clara's expression flickered, something crossing her face too quickly to read. "Same as always. 3 hours of sitting there while they pump poison into me, hoping it kills the right cells. Dr. Patel seems optimistic, though. She thinks this protocol might actually work." "Clara, don't." She held up her free hand, stopping him before he could voice the worry that was always there, always lurking. "We've had this conversation 100 times. We take it one day at a time. That's all we can do." A nurse entered, not Janet from before, but a younger man with red hair and tired eyes. He checked Marcus's vitals, adjusted something on the IV, and made notes on a tablet. "Looking good, Judge Hale. Dr. Ramirez will be by in about an hour to check on you. In the meantime, just rest. Let your body heal." "Thank you," Clara said, when Marcus didn't respond fast enough. The nurse nodded and left, his soft-soled shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum. They sat in silence for a while, Marcus's hand in Clara's, the rain still falling outside, though softer now, more of a mist than a downpour. The city lights were coming on, Portland transforming into its evening self, the bridges lit up like strings of jewels, downtown's towers glowing amber and white, the neon signs of the East Side beginning their nightly parade of color. "This wing," Clara said suddenly, her voice thoughtful, "it's really something, isn't it? I've been all over this hospital for my treatments, and this is different, nicer." Marcus looked around his room with fresh eyes. She was right. Everything here felt more intentional, more carefully designed than the standard hospital fare. "I heard the nurses talking earlier. Something about it almost being shut down." "Oh, that." Clara nodded, her expression turning animated, in that way it did when she was about to tell him something interesting. "It's actually an incredible story. About 8 months ago, the state announced budget cuts that would have closed this entire wing. It's specifically for neurological care, strokes, brain injuries, degenerative diseases, that kind of thing. Closing it would have meant patients having to go to Seattle or Salem for specialized care." She shifted in her chair, getting more comfortable as she warmed to her subject. But then, right at the last minute, an anonymous donor came forward, funded the entire wing's operations for 3 years, just wrote the check. No fanfare, no naming rights, nothing. The hospital tried to figure out who it was so they could thank them properly, maybe name the wing after them, but the donor refused, made it a condition of the gift, complete anonymity. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, though he couldn't quite identify what. "How much?" $12 million. Clara's eyes were wide. "Can you imagine? $12 million. Just given away, asking for nothing in return, not even recognition. The nurses all talk about it like it's a fairy tale, the mystery guardian angel who saved the program. $12 million. The number was staggering, almost incomprehensible. Marcus had spent his career dealing with the monetary side of justice, fines, restitution, damages, but this was something else entirely. This was pure altruism on a scale he'd rarely encountered. "I wish I knew who it was," Clara continued. "I'd like to thank them. This wing, this room you're in right now, it only exists because someone cared enough to give that much. Without them, you'd probably be in a hallway somewhere, or they'd have shipped you to OHSU and..." She trailed off, leaving the rest unspoken. "And I wouldn't be able to sit here with you. We'd be in different hospitals, separated even in crisis." Before Marcus could respond, voices rose in the hallway outside his room. Not angry exactly, but tense, urgent. "Sir, you can't be up here without authorization. I'm not staying. I just need to check on something. This is a restricted wing. I'll need to call security." Marcus's door opened, and his entire world tilted on its axis for the second time that day. Cole Riker stood in the doorway. He was still wearing the same battered jeans and black t-shirt from the courtroom, though someone had apparently posted his bail, or maybe they'd released him on his own recognizance pending appeal. His left eye was still swollen, the bruising darker now, if anything, spreading across half his face in shades of purple, black, and sickly yellow-green. But that wasn't what made Marcus's breath catch. It was the expression on Cole's face. Not anger, not satisfaction at seeing the judge who'd humiliated him now laid low in a hospital bed. It was concern, genuine, unmistakable concern. "Just wanted to make sure he was okay," Cole said quietly to the nurse, hovering anxiously behind him in the hallway. "I'll leave in a minute." Clara had gone very still beside Marcus's bed, her hand tightening around his. Marcus could feel the tension radiating off her, the protective instinct of a wife seeing a strange man, a clearly dangerous strange man, enter her husband's hospital room uninvited. "You!" Marcus managed, his voice stronger now, fueled by confusion and rising anger. "What are you doing here?" Cole stepped fully into the room, and the hallway nurse made an uncertain sound, but didn't try to physically stop him. Marcus noticed the way Cole moved, careful, deliberate, like someone very conscious of the space he occupied and the potential threat he represented. Not the movements of someone looking for a fight. "Heard you collapsed," Cole said simply. "Wanted to make sure you were all right." How did you even—" Marcus started, but Cole cut him off with a slight shake of his head. "Small city, Judge. People talk." His good eye moved from Marcus to Clara, and something in his expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Hale." Clara's fingers were trembling now in Marcus's hand. "Do I know you?" "No, ma'am, but I know you." Cole's voice was gentle, respectful in a way that seemed completely at odds with everything Marcus thought he knew about the man. "How's your treatment going? The new protocol?" The bottom dropped out of Marcus's stomach. There was no way, absolutely no way, that a street thug, a biker, a member of a criminal organization should know anything about Clara's medical treatment. Unless— "How do you know about that?" Clara asked, and her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the fear underneath. They lived in a time when privacy was supposed to mean something, when HIPAA laws protected medical information, and yet this stranger knew intimate details about her cancer treatment. Cole was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving around the room, taking in the comfortable chair, the real artwork, the carefully chosen colors that made the space feel less institutional. When he looked back at Marcus, there was something in his expression that made the judge's chest tighten. "This wing," Cole said quietly. "You asked about it earlier, the anonymous donor." No, the word formed in Marcus's mind, but wouldn't come out. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. It was me, Cole finished, and the silence that followed was so complete Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in the monitor beside his bed. Clara made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Marcus felt like he'd been struck, all the air driven from his lungs. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke, some manipulation, some— "I don't understand," Clara whispered. Cole moved further into the room, but carefully, maintaining distance like he understood how his presence might be perceived. 8 months ago, the hospital announced the budget cuts. My mother— He paused, and for the first time Marcus saw something crack in that composed exterior. "My mother had a stroke 3 years ago, massive one. She was in this wing for 2 months. The care she got here, the therapy, the nurses who treated her like a person instead of just another patient, they gave her back her life. She's not 100%, probably never will be, but she can talk again, can move her right side, can live independently." He looked at the window, at the city beyond. "When I heard they were going to close it, that other people wouldn't have what she had, wouldn't get that chance. He shook his head. I couldn't let that happen. $12 million, Marcus said, and his voice sounded hollow in his own ears. You expect me to believe a... He caught himself before the word came out, but everyone in the room knew what he'd been about to say. A biker? Cole finished for him, something hard entering his tone. Yeah, Judge. A biker had $12 million to give away. Shocking, right? That trash might actually have more to their lives than what you see from your bench. Cole. Clara's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She'd released Marcus's hand and was standing now, moving toward the man who'd funded the wing that was keeping her husband alive. You paid for all this? For the whole program? Yes, ma'am. But why anonymously? Why not let people know, let them thank you? Cole's expression softened again as he looked at her. Because I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it needed to be done. And because... He glanced at Marcus, and there was something in that look, not quite pity but close, because I knew what people would think, what assumptions they'd make. A Hell's Angel throws money at a hospital, and suddenly everyone's wondering where it came from, what strings are attached, what angle he's playing. Better to just do it quietly and let it be what it is. People getting help. The hospital intercom crackled to life, calling for a doctor to some other part of the building. Outside, the rain had picked up again, pattering against the window in an irregular rhythm, and in room 347 of the neurology wing, 3 people stood in a tableau that none of them had ever imagined possible. The fight, Marcus said suddenly, the pieces clicking together in his mind with horrible clarity. This morning, the one that brought you to my court. That's why you took the sentence without arguing, why your lawyer barely mounted a defense. Cole's jaw tightened. Those guys were hassling a woman outside the bar. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Got physical when she tried to leave. I stepped in. They took a swing first, but I finished it. Yeah, I could have let my lawyer make a bigger deal out of self-defense. Could have fought the charges harder. He met Marcus's eyes directly. But what would have been the point? You'd already decided who I was the second you saw my jacket. The truth of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Cole was right. The moment he'd seen those Hell's Angels patches, Marcus had stopped seeing a person and started seeing a category, a stereotype, a convenient representation of everything he thought was wrong with a certain segment of society. And he'd called him trash. In front of a courtroom full of people, he'd called him trash. Oh, God, Clara breathed, and Marcus realized with horror that she was crying. Marcus, what did you do? I only did my job, he started, but the words tasted like ash. Your job, Cole said, and now there was an edge to his voice, sharp and hard. Your job is justice, isn't it? Not judgment, not deciding someone's worth based on what they wear or who they associate with. Justice, and you didn't even try. Marcus wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain that he'd been protecting society, upholding the law, doing what needed to be done. But every argument died in his throat because standing in front of him was a man who'd given $12 million, more money than Marcus would see in several lifetimes, to save a medical program not for recognition or tax benefits or social status, but simply because it was the right thing to do, and he'd called him trash. I should go, Cole said, backing toward the door. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, Judge. Despite everything, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. He nodded to Clara. Mrs. Hale, I hope your treatment works. I really do. Wait, Clara said, and there was steel in her voice now, that same iron core that had drawn Marcus to her all those years ago. You can't just drop this on us and leave. We need to. Marcus needs to. But Cole was already at the door, his hand on the frame. There's nothing to talk about, ma'am. Your husband made his position on me pretty clear. I respect that, even if I don't agree with it. The wing's funded, the program's safe. That's all that matters. He looked at Marcus one last time, and in that moment, the judge saw something he'd missed completely in the courtroom. The weight this man carried, the complexity of a life lived in shades of grey that Marcus's black and white worldview couldn't accommodate. Take care of each other, Cole said quietly. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving Marcus and Clara alone in the comfortable room that existed only because of the man the judge had called unworthy of mercy. Clara sank back into her chair, her hands shaking. Marcus lay in his hospital bed, his head pounding, his heart racing, his entire understanding of the world cracked open like an egg. Outside, the rain fell on Portland, washing the city clean. But inside room 347, the stains of prejudice and pride weren't so easily washed away. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Not really. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his dreams fragmenting into surreal tableaus where he stood in his courtroom pronouncing judgment on himself while Cole Riker sat behind the bench, that swollen eye watching with patient silence. Each time he jolted awake, the hospital room reformed around him. The sage-green walls, the photograph of Multnomah Falls, the sound of Clara's breathing in the chair where she'd refused to leave despite the nurses offering her a proper bed. Dawn came slowly to Portland, the darkness giving way to grey that was barely lighter, the rain finally exhausted into mist that clung to the city like shame. Marcus watched the sunrise through his window, or what passed for sunrise behind the permanent November overcast, and tried to reconcile two irreconcilable truths: the man he'd been yesterday and the man he needed to become. Dr. Ramirez came by at 7, running through the standard neurological tests. Follow my finger, squeeze my hand, tell me what year it is, and pronounced him stable enough to leave in a day or two, provided he committed to physical therapy and stress reduction. The stroke was minor, she said, her dark eyes serious. But it's a warning shot, Judge Hale. Your body is telling you something needs to change. She had no idea how right she was. Clara left reluctantly at 8, needing to get back to her own treatment schedule. She kissed his forehead, held his hand for a long moment, and said nothing about the elephant that had taken up residence in the room. But her eyes said plenty: disappointment, confusion, and underneath it all, a question. Who is this man I married? Marcus couldn't answer because he was asking himself the same thing. The morning passed in the peculiar purgatory of hospital time, where minutes stretched like taffy and hours vanished without warning. Nurses came and went. A physical therapist assessed his mobility. Breakfast arrived on a tray: eggs that tasted like warm cardboard, toast that could have been used as roofing material, and he picked at it without appetite. It was just after 10 when Marcus made his decision. He buzzed for the nurse, Janet, back on shift, and when she arrived, he asked for help getting into his wheelchair. His legs worked mostly, but hospital policy and his own lingering dizziness made walking alone inadvisable. "Where are we going?" Janet asked, professional but warm, as she helped him settle into the chair. "I need to find someone," Marcus said. "Cole Riker. Is he still in the hospital?" Janet's expression shifted, surprise mingling with something that might have been approval. "He is. Checked himself in last night. That eye of his got infected. He's down in treatment room C in the ER. Of course he was. Because Cole hadn't mentioned that his injury needed medical attention, hadn't complained or drawn attention to his own pain while standing in Marcus's room last night. Just checked to make sure the judge was okay, and then quietly dealt with his own crisis. "Can you take me there?" Janet studied him for a long moment, and Marcus had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen through, all his judicial authority stripped away to reveal the uncertain, humbled man underneath. "I think that's a very good idea," she finally said. The elevator ride down felt interminable. Marcus watched the floor numbers descend, each one marking a step toward a conversation he had no idea how to have. What did you say to someone you'd publicly humiliated, only to discover they'd been quietly saving lives, possibly including your own, while you were busy condemning them? The emergency department was controlled chaos at mid-morning. The typical Portland mix of work injuries, homeless individuals seeking warmth and medical care, parents with sick children, and the general tide of human suffering that flowed through hospital doors daily. Janet navigated them through with practiced efficiency, her badge opening doors and clearing paths. Treatment room C was at the end of a hallway, the door half open. Through it, Marcus could see Cole sitting on an examination table, his leather jacket hung on a hook nearby. A young doctor was working on his eye, cleaning the swollen tissue with careful precision, while Cole sat perfectly still. "Should have come in yesterday when this happened," the doctor was saying. "Another few hours and you'd be looking at serious complications. As it is, you'll need antibiotics and probably a drainage procedure." "Will it wait a few hours?" Cole asked. "I've got somewhere I need to be." "Mr. Riker, I really don't think—" "I'll come back," Cole said. And there was that quiet certainty again, the sense that when this man made a promise, he kept it. "But I need to take care of something first." Janet knocked lightly on the doorframe, and both men looked up. The doctor's expression went professionally neutral, but Cole's face did something complicated. Surprise, then wariness, then that same careful composure settling back into place. "Judge Hale needs to speak with you," Janet said, and the weight she put on needs suggested she understood more than Marcus had realized. "I'll be right outside if you require anything." She withdrew, and Marcus wheeled himself the rest of the way into the small treatment room. The doctor glanced between them, sensing undercurrents he couldn't possibly understand, and quickly excused himself. "I'll give you some privacy. Mr. Riker, please don't leave without finishing the treatment." Then they were alone. Cole on the examination table and Marcus in his wheelchair, the morning light filtering through a high window to paint everything in shades of clinical grey. "How's your head?" Cole asked first, because apparently even now, even after everything, this man's instinct was to check on others. "Clearing," Marcus said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, tentative, lacking the commanding certainty that usually characterized his speech. "I need to talk to you." "So talk." And where to begin? How to even start unraveling the tangle of assumptions, prejudices, and self-righteousness that had brought them to this moment? "I was wrong," Marcus said finally, because sometimes the simple truth was the only place to start. "Yesterday, in the courtroom, I was wrong." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his good eye studying Marcus with an intensity that made the judge want to look away. "What specifically were you wrong about, Judge? The law, the sentence, or the part where you called me trash in front of everyone?" The words hit like punches, each one landing exactly where it was meant to. Marcus felt his face burn, shame crawling up his neck. "All of it, but especially that. I had no right." "You had every right," Cole interrupted. "You're a judge. You've got the robe, the gavel, the authority to pass judgment. That's literally your job. But here's the thing you don't seem to understand." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and his voice dropped to something quieter, but no less intense. "Having the right to judge doesn't mean you're doing it correctly. Doesn't mean you're seeing the whole picture. Doesn't mean you know a damn thing about the person standing in front of you." "Then tell me," Marcus said, and it came out almost pleading. "Help me understand. Because I spent 23 years thinking I knew how to see people, how to sort the redeemable from the irredeemable, and in one night you destroyed that entire framework." Cole sat back, something like bitter amusement crossing his features. "You want my life story? That going to make you feel better? Help you figure out where you went wrong? I want to understand how I could have been so blind." "Fine." Miss Cole's jaw tightened, and Marcus could see how much it cost him to speak about this, how much he preferred to keep his life private. "I'm third-generation Hell's Angels. My grandfather founded the Portland chapter. My father ran it for 20 years before he died. I grew up in that world, the bikes, the brotherhood, the code. And yeah, before you ask, some of that world is exactly what you think it is. Violence, illegal activities, things I'm not proud of." He paused, his hand unconsciously moving to the swollen side of his face. "But it's also more than that. It's a family, Judge. For guys who don't fit anywhere else, who can't navigate the straight world with its rules and its judgments and its assumptions about who's worth something and who's not. It's a place where your word means everything and your brothers have your back no matter what. That doesn't excuse—" I'm not asking for excuses. Cole cut him off sharply. I'm trying to explain that people are complicated. I've done things I regret. I've also done things I'm proud of. When my mom had her stroke, the club was there every day. Brothers taking shifts to sit with her, bringing food, helping with bills. No insurance company or social program did that. My brothers did. He stood, moving to the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the grey light. After she recovered, I started thinking about all the people who didn't have what she had. The single mom with no support system, the old man whose kids don't visit, the broke college student who can't afford physical therapy, and I thought about how I could change that. So you funded the entire wing. Marcus was still trying to wrap his mind around the logistics of it. Where did you even get that kind of money? Cole turned, and there was something like amusement in his expression. You ever hear of RK Automotive? The name was familiar. A chain of high-end motorcycle and custom car shops scattered across the Pacific Northwest, known for quality work and innovative designs. That's you? Started the first shop 12 years ago. Now I've got 7 locations from Seattle to Eugene. Turns out I'm good at business, Judge. Turns out trash can build something legitimate, can employ people, can contribute to the tax base and the community. The bitterness was back in his voice. But you didn't see any of that yesterday. You saw the jacket and decided you knew everything there was to know. Marcus felt something breaking inside him, some fundamental belief about his own righteousness cracking apart. You're right, I did, and I can't. His voice cracked, decades of judicial composure finally fracturing. I can't take it back. I can't undo what I said, what I did, but I need you to know that I see it now. I see how wrong I was. Do you, though? Cole moved closer, and there was no aggression in the movement, but there was challenge. Because here's what I need to know, Judge. If I walked into your courtroom tomorrow wearing a suit instead of my cut, would you see me differently? If I showed up with a briefcase and a Yale law degree, would that make me worthy of mercy? Or is it only now, after you found out about the money, that I've become human to you? The question landed like a blade between Marcus's ribs. Because the truth, the ugly, uncomfortable truth, was that he didn't know. Would he have seen Cole differently yesterday if he'd known about RK Automotive, about the donation, about the complexity beneath the leather and patches? Or would he have still seen the Hells Angels insignia and made his judgment accordingly? I don't know, Marcus admitted, and saying it out loud felt like stripping naked. I want to believe I would have been better, but honestly, I don't know, and that terrifies me. Cole studied him for a long moment, and Marcus forced himself to hold that gaze, to not look away from the judgment he saw there. At least you're honest about it, Cole finally said. That's more than most people manage. It's not enough. No, Cole agreed. It's not, but it's a start. Silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the emergency department. Voices, equipment, the eternal beeping of monitors. Marcus thought about Clara, about the year they'd spent navigating her cancer, about the fear that lived in his chest every time he thought about losing her, and he thought about how that same fear must have driven Cole when his mother had her stroke, how it had translated into action that saved not just one life but potentially hundreds. The sentence, Marcus said quietly, I can't unmake it. But I can recommend modification, reduction to time served, probation, community service. It won't erase what happened in that courtroom, but keep it, Cole interrupted. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. What? The sentence? Keep it. I'll serve the 6 months. Cole's expression was unreadable. Not because I think I deserve it. Those guys came at me first, and I'd do it again to protect that woman. But because I need you to understand something, Judge. I don't want your charity. I don't want your guilt-motivated clemency. If you're going to change, if you're actually going to learn something from this, it needs to be real, not just you making yourself feel better by cutting me a break. That's not, Marcus started, but Cole held up his hand. Yeah, it is. Right now you're drowning in guilt, and you want to fix it by being lenient. But 6 months from now, when some other guy in a Hell's Angels jacket shows up in your courtroom, what are you going to do? Are you going to remember this, or are you going to slide back into your assumptions? I need you to sit with this, Judge. Really sit with it. Let it change you, not just how you treat me, but how you see everyone who comes before your bench. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. You're asking me to let you go to jail when I know it's unjust. I'm asking you to learn the difference between law and justice, Cole said softly. They're not always the same thing. You know that, right? You've been on that bench for 23 years. You must have seen it. Cases where the law said one thing but justice demanded another. Times when the letter of the law missed the spirit entirely. He had. God help him, he had. Cases where mandatory minimums forced his hand into sentences he knew were too harsh. Situations where the law's rigidity couldn't account for human complexity. And each time Marcus had hidden behind judicial duty, told himself he was simply following the law, that his personal feelings were irrelevant. But his personal feelings were what had called Cole trash. His personal feelings were what had denied mercy. So which was it? Were feelings relevant to justice, or weren't they? I don't know how to do this, Marcus admitted. I don't know how to be a judge who sees clearly instead of through assumptions. Then maybe start by seeing people, Cole said. Not categories, not stereotypes, not convenient boxes to sort humanity into. Just people. Complicated, contradictory, capable of both tremendous good and terrible mistakes. People like you. People like me. The door opened, and Janet peered in. Sorry to interrupt, but Judge Hale needs to get back to his room for his medication, and Mr. Riker, that doctor is getting anxious about your eye. Cole nodded, standing and reaching for his jacket. Marcus watched him shrug it on, the leather settling across his shoulders, the patches declaring his affiliation to anyone who looked. Yesterday, those patches had been all Marcus could see. Now they were just part of a much more complicated picture. Cole, Marcus said as the biker headed for the door. Cole paused, looking back. Thank you. For the wing. For checking on me last night. For this conversation, for all of it. Don't thank me, Judge. Just do better. That's all anyone can ask. Then he was gone, and Janet was wheeling Marcus back toward the elevator, back toward his comfortable room in the wing that existed because of the man he'd called unworthy. 3 days later, Marcus was discharged with a fistful of prescriptions, a strict physical therapy schedule, and orders to reduce his stress levels, the last of which made him laugh, because how did you reduce stress when you were fundamentally rethinking your entire worldview? Clara drove him home, to their Laurelhurst house, the old craftsman they'd bought 30 years ago when the neighborhood was affordable, and before it became one of Portland's most desirable addresses. The rain had finally broken, giving way to one of those crystalline autumn days that made the Pacific Northwest worth enduring 9 months of gray. The maple trees lining their street burned gold and crimson, and the air smelled of wood smoke and wet earth. She helped him inside, got him settled on the couch with blankets and tea, and then sat beside him with that look he'd learned to recognize over nearly 3 decades, the look that meant they were going to have a conversation with a capital C. What are you going to do? She asked without preamble. Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm mug, choosing his words carefully. I'm going to be a better judge. That's vague, and you know it. He smiled despite everything. I'm going to request sensitivity training. I'm going to review my past cases, look for patterns in my sentencing. I'm going to actually listen to public defenders instead of assuming they're just gumming up the works. I'm going to... He trailed off, the immensity of the task suddenly overwhelming. Clara took his hand. You're going to be kinder. That's what you're going to do. You're going to remember that everyone who stands in your courtroom is a person first, and whatever else they are second. Yes, Marcus said simply. That. And Cole, his sentence. He won't let me change it. Says he needs me to learn from this, and I think he's right. Marcus looked at his wife, this woman who'd stood beside him through everything. I called him trash, Clara. in front of everyone, and he responded by saving my life. Maybe that's the lesson, she said quietly. That mercy isn't earned, that grace is given freely, that the people we dismiss as unworthy might be the very ones keeping us alive. Marcus thought about that as the afternoon light slanted through their living room windows, painting everything gold. Thought about Cole serving 6 months for defending someone, about $12 million, given with no expectation of recognition, about a mother sitting in a hospital room surrounded by her son's brothers who society had written off as criminals. He thought about justice and how badly he'd misunderstood it. 6 weeks later, Marcus returned to the bench. His speech had fully recovered. His physical therapy was progressing well, and his doctor had cleared him for work with the caveat that he maintain regular breaks and actually eat lunch like a normal human being. His first day back, there was a card waiting on his desk. No name, no return address. Inside, just 5 words in careful handwriting. Hope you're doing better. C. Marcus kept it in his desk drawer, pulling it out sometimes when he needed to remember. The cases still came. The parade of human frailty and poor decisions continued its eternal march through courtroom 4C. But now, when Marcus looked at the people before his bench, he tried to see them, really see them. Not categories or stereotypes or convenient boxes, but individuals with stories he didn't know, carrying burdens he couldn't see, capable of surprising grace in unexpected moments. He wasn't perfect at it. Old habits died hard, and sometimes he caught himself making assumptions before stopping, reconsidering, looking deeper. But he tried. Every day, he tried. And sometimes, late at night, when Clara was asleep beside him and the city was quiet beyond their windows, Marcus thought about a man in a leather jacket with patches that proclaimed his allegiance to an organization society dismissed. Thought about that man sitting in a jail cell he didn't deserve, serving time for defending someone, asking for nothing except that a judge learn to see clearly. The rain returned to Portland. It always did, washing the city clean again and again, each storm a fresh start, each morning an opportunity to do better than yesterday. In his courtroom, behind his bench with his gavel in hand, Marcus Hale was learning that justice wasn't about being right. It was about being willing to admit when you were wrong, to see beyond your assumptions, to extend mercy even, especially when someone didn't fit your comfortable categories. It was about recognizing that sometimes the person you call trash might be the one keeping you alive, and that was a lesson worth learning, no matter how painful the teaching.